the FujiCast.
Hello, welcome to episode number 12. This is a very different week this week. I'll explain why in a second. First of all, thank you to our friends at Simpler Straps for letting us give away a military-grade, rugged camera strap, each to our favourite email question of the week. If you'd like to see their straps, then go to Simpler. I'm using mine now. SIMPLR. Simpler.us. SIMPLR.us. I'm not using the military colour though. There is a kind of greeny colour.
Yeah, that's the one I use.
I'm using the. Oh, did you?
Yeah, I got the green one. Yeah,
you got the green one.
Yeah, it's like an olive colour.
That's right.
Yeah, I like that.
That's military grade. Military grade colour.
Yeah.
So thank you to Simpler. Remember that all your competition answers and winners, etc., are on the website only at www.fujicast.co.uk. Last week on the ginormous episode that we recorded, I forgot really to say we both forgot really to say the email. Since I got rid of the email effect because people kept moaning about it, we're now forgetting to mention the email address. So it's click at fujicast.co.uk. Your questions are really, really important. Please send them in. There's no guest as such this week. We're out on the road. A bit of a different episode. We're starting here, and then we'll be out on the road. It's more of a feature, really, than a guest. We went to see the Don McCullin exhibition as it closed down in London, and I thought it'd be fun to record something really on the road. So in a moment, you're going to hear On the Road. And guess where we end up? You can find out in a moment's time. So should we crack on with the questions? Do you want to go for yours?
Let's go.
Yours first.
Let's go. So I have, and this will be my Simpler strap of the week, question of the week, as we're only doing one. So this is to Louise Y. WHY. Yep. I shot my first real wedding a few weekdays ago as the primary and only photographer. Previously to this, I've shot a handful of weddings as a second shooter where I found it easier to capture the moments and concentrate on the light and composition. I really struggled with nerves at this wedding, and looking at the images I can see that my creativity was definitely stunted by this. Oh. So my question is, how do you prevent the pressure of the day from making you take boring and safe images? Although the photos are fine and the clients I'm sure will be very happy, of course they will be, I can't help feeling like I missed a lot of opportunity to make amazing photos.
Oh, you sound very hard on yourself there as well.
Yeah, don't be hard on yourself.
If you don't mind me saying.
Absolutely. No, the answer, well, I don't know. Well, from my point of view, at least, Neil, is that I'm always nervous. I've mentioned this before. I'm always nervous before a wedding. Always a bit anxious. But sometimes, this idea of falling into the trap of taking boring and safe images is a situation of consequence. Sometimes that's really all that happens. You can't always produce magic. It doesn't always happen, and depends on the pedestrian nature of the wedding. Sometimes that's what's going to happen. So don't worry too much about that in that respect. However, I still also find myself, when I like during a drinks reception or something like that, I'll actually go to my phone and I'll scan back through some of my old blog posts and things and look at pictures, not necessarily from the same venue, but just to give me an idea of stuff that I've done before. I'll always remember what Tom Stoddart says about getting down on your knees. Great photojournalists should always have dirty knees. And looking for angles and this is really interesting. Okay, so this is something I can't remember whether we spoke about this already. Using audio to drive your photographic senses. Okay?
Well, you mean you're playing something back into your ears? Or?
So consider this. Right. Now, this is something that I picked up from Patrick Larocque, although not in this context. I've saw him talk about this, and then I've kind of molded it into my own way. You're at a wedding reception. It's drinks reception, or maybe it's after the speeches and it's a bit of a lull, and you're kind of thinking
that's always the biggest lull, isn't it?
Yeah. There's nothing happening. What can I do? What can I take pictures of? I don't know. What should I do? So I've done this a couple of times and it works really well. I actually use my little Instamic recorder, but you can use your mobile phone. Yep. Stick the mobile phone on record audio, stick it on the table, sit back, let it record for 2-3 minutes. Pick the phone up or the Instamic, take it outside of the room you're in and listen to the audio. Okay. Now the audio tells you so much about what's going on in that room. the audio will pick up the characters. You'll hear the waitresses clattering things around. You'll hear people laughing. You'll hear kids screaming. You'll hear, just the echoey nature. You'll hear things that will be able to tell you a story audio that you can then think, right, these are the things I'm going to go and photograph. So connecting that with the who, why, what, where, when that we've talked about in the past, you can use that audio to tweak your mind and just nudge you in the right direction, And I do it for street photography all the time. So if I'm on a street corner or something, I'll just record some audio for a little bit and then listen back to that, and then that helps me think about what I'm going to photograph.
What a great suggestion!
It works. It's really good.
Wow.
Really good.
I thought you were going to say you have an earpiece and you listen to music that might bring the mood on. That might sound an odd thing, but Sean Tucker from a couple of weeks ago, the interview on episode 9, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was saying during our walk around that he said that occasionally he'll play music when he's just wandering the streets into his ears, not just for the enjoyment of listening to music, but to drive him in his creative process. And he finds that the kind of ambient music that you go to copyright-free music libraries for can often be very, very good to drive your emotion. When
I'm shooting on the streets and I'm out and about, I use the cinematic chill-out section on Spotify.
Yeah. Oh, what a great idea.
Yeah.
But going back to the nerves thing, though, that's something I'm not sure you can do an awful lot about. It's kind of that's what you might call flying hours. The more hours you spend up in that cockpit looking down, the more you're getting used to the feeling of what the whole thing is like to fly.
Yeah.
The easier it's going to get.
Yeah. That's true.
But not always. Some actors, actually, having said that, some actors have terrifically. I'm trying to think of the really. The name's gone from me. Male actor. Never mind.
No, narrows it down.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, about 3,500. But I just remember an interview. It's somebody of Anthony Hopkins' stature, but it's not Anthony Hopkins, saying that he still feels the same nerves today as he did the day that he started acting. But he uses that as a conduit. He uses that as something because he's being on edge. He says is good for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think having that little tweak of excitement and anxiety, adrenaline, whatever it is a good thing. Yeah. So mostly don't be too hard on yourself. We all get nervous. Well, certainly I do, and try and do your best to not take boring pictures.
Do you remember, I think you might have been on the same workshop that I was on with Jeff Askoff, the Canon, he was at the time Canon ambassador in wedding photography, talking about him feeling really, really nervous and actually having to get that first frame away to, not maybe nervous, but feeling that anticipation, but having to get that first frame away in the day to think, whew, right, now we can just get on with it.
Yeah. I to be honest with you, the thing I'm most nervous about is getting the right date and time and getting to the place on time. I still pull up every day to the wedding, to the bridal reception, bridal prep area or whatever, and think, right, I found, I'll knock on the door, and what if they answer and say,
the wrong person?
Who are you looking for? or oh no, the wedding was last Saturday, or that's the things that kind of, as soon as they answer the door and it's mum in her curlers and I can hear girls bubbling in the background, then I know I relax a bit.
You must have been to a venue where they've where with a long drive kind of thing, where they put the names up of those that are getting married, and they've just forgotten to take away those ones from the day before or a couple of days before, and you're driving in thinking, nope, this is not Sharon and Tom. No. This is not. Whose wedding is this?
That's right. That's happened a couple of times. Yeah.
Right. So strap going to
Louise Y.
Well done, Louise. This one is from Chris Hunt. It's kind of a two-part thing, this really. We'll go for the first bit, and then Chris, I hope you've got a good sense of humour for the second part. Hi, Neil and Kevin. Love the podcast. Really enjoyed the interview with Sean Tucker. Thank you very much. Also, listen to the longer version on Breathe Pictures. Oh, that's very kind of you. Sean is such an enigmatic person. He is, most
that's
definitely.
That's a really good word to use.
Authentically enigmatic. Correct. As well.
Yeah.
My question is about using vintage lenses. I have a Fujifilm X-T20. We talk about vintage quite a lot, I know, but there's no reason why we can't again. Having recently converted to Fuji from an entry-level Nikon or Nikon, I love my camera. It's the one I chose for myself rather than following the advice of other people. I have two lenses, 18-55 2.8, superb lens. I use that for filming, and the 55 to 200. I'm still relatively new to the game and I still have tons to learn. Love the idea of fitting vintage lens to my camera. Wonder if you could tell me how to go about it and what sort of lenses would be a good choice. I believe you can pick up some decent glass for a reasonable price, which you certainly can. Now, you've used vintage lenses.
I have, mostly on my GFX, or on the other GFX. You need an adapter, basically, if you're going to use a vintage lens. And there are loads and loads and loads of them out there, and they are often very cheap as well. You know, the is it the Canon MFDs? What they call the MFD lenses?
Not sure.
Manual focus, something or other.
Okay.
I've got like 3 or 4 Minolta
Our friend
lenses.
Alan Gump, fact checker.
Gump
Alan,
will
tell us, please. Expect a stream of emails from Alan now.
Good old Alan. Bless him. Yeah, so you need an adapter. But you can get those on eBay, Amazon, and then whatever. I mean, it's quite a wide question, really. You can use them. You will, dependent on the type of lens, depends on the kind of distortion you might get, any kind of afflictions to the lenses. But have fun, and we've mentioned it in the past. Jonas Rask, he's got a whole section on his website about legacy lenses, and his stuff's great.
Yeah, it's worth going to Jonas's website for that, isn't it? Definitely. If you haven't been there already, Chris. Sometimes when we're looking, certainly when I'm looking through the questions for the podcast, I'll be sat there often in our family room. A lot of the time when I'm reading through questions, I'm sat there with the family all around me, and I must admit, I was looking through this one from Chris, and there was a second part to this email.
Oh, right.
And it said, I have a little request. Neil, could you please stop interrupting Kevin when he's talking? I find it incredibly annoying and irritating. He doesn't get to say many words before you jump in and cut across him with some rubbish. Fortunately, he can pick up his thread again and carry on. I'm sorry, but I think I have to mention it.
Did I ever tell you about the time that I went to...
Kevin is probably too polite to say anything. There we go. From Chris. Now, as I was reading it, my first reaction was, oh, rubbish. Ouch. Thanks very much. And then my little Thomas, youngest son Thomas, said, that reminds me of the interrupting sheep joke.
Yes.
Do you remember the interrupting sheep joke?
Knock.
Who's there?
The interrupting cow.
Interrupting.
Moo.
There we go. He loves
So
that
we
one.
don't have interrupting sheep in Wales.
Knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting Theresa May.
Interrupted Theresa.
Brexit means Brexit.
Knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting sheep.
Interrupted sheep.
Chris, point noted. I'm going to file that one. You get a strap, by the way, Chris. I'm awarding you the strap because actually I thought I liked the vintage question, and it was a bit of fun because we sat in the family room and we did interrupting sheep jokes for around about half an hour.
Really?
We could actually make it last that long.
Yeah.
This week, a very different end to the show. We decided to do this one on location. And while we talk about on location, by the way, we stuck a date in for Brighton, haven't we?
We have.
It's a bit further away than we thought it was going to be. I've got the diary here. It's going to be in September.
Yes.
And it's on Tuesday the 10th, I think. It's just after the summer holidays. We'll all look... Kev will, because he goes... You go away for a month. You look sickeningly well and tanned and ready to go for another year.
Alcohol drained.
So Tuesday the 10th. You've got some Brighton mentions down there. Do you want to run through a few of those?
So Keith Martin up for chips on the pier and a Dolphin Derby challenge.
Definitely. Yes. A what challenge?
Dolphin Derby.
What's that?
Dolphin Derby challenge.
Dolphin Derby challenge.
Say that really fast.
Dolphin Derby challenge.
Sounds like Dolphy. That's what I said.
Dolphy. What is the Dolphin Derby challenge? Go on then, keep reading. I'm going to look up Dolphin Derby challenge. Derby.
That was Keith.
Oh, Dolphin Derby Brighton Pier.
It's not a real thing.
It
is.
Look, here we go.
Oh my God.
Brighton Pier dolphin race.
Yeah.
There's a video on it. What's the?
There we go. It's like the horses they used to have.
Number 18 playing.
Oh, right. So everybody lines up here.
Cool.
And the dolphins, they set off. Look.
Yeah, and then you got to throw a little ball. You throw balls up the thing in front of you, and
I'm
the
glad
more
you
your
said
the balls fall in the holes,
Right.
the faster your dolphin will go.
God, that guy's very good at it. Look, that one's well out in front.
Yeah, but they always come from behind at the end.
Godolphin.
The dolphin. Look at that one. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
That's the dolphin challenge.
Aaron Russell, yes, I live in the Midlands and come from Brighton and don't get down enough. So a Brighton walk around with both of you guys.
10th of September.
10th of September, and we shall put more plans in place for that, of course.
Well, that gives us 3 months to find some friends, 4 months to find some friends.
Correct, yes, and to tell wives. So we'll do a photo walk and chat and a couple of drinks and stuff.
Fish and chips. Have to do fish and chips.
Fish and chips and
Definitely.
a Dolphy Derby walk.
I think we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago that do you remember when Facundo and Patrick were photographing with us? Well, they were photographing, we were watching in awe, I think. And there was that family that came out with a portion of chips, and they literally got mugged by the seagull. No, not the seagull.
Don't you say seagull.
By the gull. There's no such thing as a seagull.
No such thing as a seagull.
All right.
Come on, Alan.
Alan, yes, fact check that one for us. Alan, you've just become unofficial fact checker for this. Try saying that quickly for the show. It's certainly a case of light and shade this week on the podcast. First part in studio as ever. The second part on location in London. 3/4 of us in the end took in the Don McCullin retrospective at Tate Britain, the most extensive show of his work, Kev, I've personally encountered. Taking in early work, Berlin, Cyprus, the Republic of Congo, Biafra, Vietnam, Cambodia, the East End, Northern Ireland, Bradford and the North, Bangladesh, Beirut, Iraq, the AIDS pandemic, India, Southern Ethiopia, and then his landscapes and still life. You'll hear in the second part the voices of myself, Kevin obviously, Michael Schilling, a successful studio photographer in the city, and Canon ambassador Sanjay Jogi. Now, I wasn't sure how we'd be able to tackle that in what is essentially at heart a chat show with your letters and emails each week. So we thought we'd do a kind of audio tour and read you some of the great man's thoughts from the exhibitions guide, peppered with our own reactions as we toured the exhibition. We were in there hours, but you won't hear hours of comments from us because, as anyone who's visited this exhibition will probably tell you, there's a definite requirement just to view, and it's hard to gather at the time eloquent thoughts whilst your senses are coming to terms with the subject matter before you. So apologies if some of the sound quality isn't as easy to hear, but we've done our very best in post-production for this, the second part of this week's podcast, the Don McCullin exhibition.
You cannot imagine the shame that I have to live with, thinking about those men who cried, thinking I could stop their execution, which I could never do. And I go into my darkroom, I make these prints, and they come up in the developer, and I relive those days. I didn't invite these things to come into my photographic life. And quite frankly, thank God I still have the courage to admit to my shame. I feel ashamed of a lot of my photography. It never cured anything, or it never stopped another war.
Don McCullin talking to journalists and an audience in 2013. McCullin grew up in North London in Finsbury Park, where he was introduced to photography in what he describes as an accidental manner. He photographed the gangs that he'd gone to school with, including members of a particular gang in the city known as the Governors. The gang were implicated in an infamous murder of a policeman, and McCullin's photographs of this gang first brought him to the attention of Fleet Street and his intuitive and instinctive ability behind the lens, which was what started him on his way. 250 prints are on display, and the curator Simon Baker introduces you immediately to those North London images. Now, I've personally pored over these pictures so many times, mainly through the pages of McCullin's In England book. My own mother and father grew up not far from Seven Sisters Road, the canvas, it seems, for many of those early images. For me, and for Kevin, the power and currency of nostalgia is immediately evident.
But I think, like what I think about this kind of stuff is, if somebody entered that into competition, they would slate it, right? Because they don't have the idea, they don't have the understanding, the power of nostalgia. And when people moan about everybody in the street, all they're doing is on their mobile phone, they should still take pictures, because in 20, 30 years' time, they'll look at those pictures and then they'll think, oh, do you remember when everything was like that?
But that's your argument for all that ridiculous banning of street photography at the moment, is there's going to be nothing to see in 30 years' time, because nobody would have been making any pictures, which seems bizarre, doesn't it, when you think of Instagram?
Yeah.
What's even more extraordinary about this exhibition is the fact that McCullin has printed all these images himself, and as the guide points out, the photographer is forced to revisit these what's described as painful memories time and time again through this process.
It's like all the pictures that you see from India now, where they have the grizzly old men and stuff like that, the monks. And if you turn around, there'll be 45 photographers taking the exact same picture, and then they all give him 10 rupees.
But that just becomes photographic poverty tourism.
There was one, I don't know if it won an award or not, but there was one, it was a fisherman on the Ganges, and it was, beautiful picture, him early, dawn, throwing his nets in the water, he had the big beard and everything, and then there was a wider picture, and there was at least 30 people sat on a jetty, taking pictures.
I think I saw that picture.
With a guide saying, go, throw the net now. I mean, I don't know if that, would you not, you'd still take that picture. Some people go for their own pleasure for that, and that's fine, but you can't pass it off as authentic. You have to just put it on your wall and admire it for what it is, rather than put it on Instagram and say, look what I got, and look how good I am, because somebody else has organised it and you paid for it.
McCullin comments that he was sitting on the biggest story in the world in 1961 when he witnessed, with camera in hand, the East Germans building the Berlin Wall. As he describes it, breeze block by breeze block.
When you look at pictures of a wall being built, history repeating itself.
Yeah, isn't it just? It's like we're walking through a timeline of our own time there. Funny enough, that those people, the Eastern people, look happier than the Western people.
Yeah.
And so we continued around the exhibition through Cyprus, which McCullin says introduced him to empathic feeling, the first time he felt able to share other people's emotional experiences. This 1964 photographic tour yielded his first images of conflict, prior to vicious and cruel fighting in the Congo in that same year, where, in his words, evil men prevailed. We all fell silent looking at the horrors of Biafra, the starvation, the genocide, the complete humanitarian crisis caused by what is now known as the Nigerian Civil War. But it was because of the work of photographers such as McCullin that the world knew about the crisis. And this was the same in places like Vietnam. As McCullin says, looking at what others cannot bear to see is what my life as a war reporter is all about. For me, I think some of the most harrowing pictures are where the photographer seems to know the fate of those before his camera, but he still faces the certainty head-on photographically by remaining close to them and faithfully, empathically telling their story, even when, as we noted through these pictures, as taunted prisoners, their fate is execution, sometimes within minutes of a frame being made.
It's quite something, isn't it? I mean, I would imagine now you wouldn't have access to this kind of picture, would you?
No.
A focal length, I'm looking at this as a kind of almost like a 24mm focal length.
Yeah.
He's right in their faces, isn't he? Looking into the eyes of men that are just about to be executed. This guy here looks like he's just about to essentially pistol whip him.
If, as an international listener to this podcast, you're not aware of McCullin's work, the chances are, I think, you will have been touched by one of his pictures without even knowing it. He's one of the most important, I believe, photographers to have ever walked this planet, and that's a grand statement, I know. He wears the scars both physically and emotionally, and it's true that he prints darker with each reprint. Michael commented to us that he's sure he's seen these pictures in a much lighter, obviously not carefree sense. McCullin says the darkness is in him, and you can witness this in his printing. If you haven't seen this particular exhibition, it's too late, but there'll be others. His work and his life is just too important. His library of work is extensive, and his books, well, let's just say if you're a photojournalist, I'm sure you have at least one volume in your possession. McCullin writes that he wants people to view his pictures, not to reject them through discomfort or fear. Not all, but many are, of course, atrocity pictures. But the importance is the voice he creates for those in the pictures. He comments that he wants to somehow seduce people into lingering for longer when they look at them. And this is the important bit. So they go away not with an intimidating memory, but with a conscious obligation. We departed the exhibition and Kevin made the comment that he felt exhausted, and I agreed. I don't think I've been to an exhibition before where I've felt that way at the end. We needed release, and usually for Mullins that's a book purchase, and actually I learned something about Cartier-Bresson on the way that I was completely unaware of. It's a bit noisy out in the lobby, but stretch your ears, make the effort, it's worth it.
Yeah, the danger now is you can look at a book.
Let's go buy some books.
You've not got a bag big enough for books.
And do you know the story of the decisive moment? What do you think the decisive moment is?
Well, I would imagine it's that moment you decide to press the shutter when you see the thing happening before your eyes.
No.
No, okay.
So, Henri Cartier-Bresson, the book is called The Decisive Moment, right? Henri Cartier-Bresson.
Yeah.
But actually it's a translation. And the original French translation is, I think, something like photography with movement. And it was translated to the decisive moment. And now the Magnum Foundation are trying to educate people to basically say that
Taking a picture of the right time.
he never.
Bresson never was promoted.
No, exactly.
He actually said, I staged this.
Yeah, well, he did a whole book called Contact Sheets, with everything.
So he never said the decisive moment?
No, it was a translation, and so Magnum are now trying to, because there's a lot of negativity about Cartier-Bresson and that phrase, and everybody going, but hang on, he never did that, and they're like, yeah, well, he never actually said
There's
that.
a shot of the guy over the puddle with the ballerina in the background and all that, people say it, and he said, yeah, I set that up, that wasn't by luck.
Is that right? Yeah. But here's that picture, hold on, I saw it, I went past it. Just because you mentioned it, I thought, oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because he's trying to replicate that, you see, in the background. Most people don't notice that.
Yeah. I never knew that.
And finally this week, the proper debrief in one of London's oldest pubs. The last one in this town to host a particular kind of bar fighting, apparently, a good few years back. It felt almost appropriate in a rather warped sense, having started McCullin's journey on the tough streets of North London. These days, it's an altogether friendlier place. The pints come in fancier glasses with fancier prices. We just thought we'd meander a bit with some thoughts, and you're welcome to stay with us for the next 15 minutes or so. Or you can allow us the privacy of a private-ish pint or two. There's a much longer version of this, which I don't think is appropriate today, but it's in the can, if you will, for a longer Christmas edition, maybe. Kev, Michael, I just want to start off with your feelings about Don McCullin, the exhibition this afternoon. Whether it makes you feel like you just want to give up now, or whether you think that inspires me to do better.
Yeah, for me, I've seen a lot of the pictures before, and it's always a pleasure to see it, but it's always an eye-opener because you realise pretty much how the world has been, and how it could be in the future. Yeah, but you were really disturbed by humanity and the way that people treat each other. Yeah, and but not so much because I knew, I'd seen those pictures and I knew I know how bad the world has been, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big believer in the fact that the world now is a much better place than it ever has been. We live in this world of doom and gloom, and the world is terrible, and we're all going to die, and terrorism, and
People often say this stuff, don't they? And then you look back at the Middle Ages where we used to burn people just for...
Exactly. We live in a better world now than ever before. Period. I believe that strongly. But it doesn't stop me thinking, actually, there is a lot of hatred and a lot of upset in the world.
Much of it, actually, is not necessarily from a war period. It's from just capturing the moment as it is now. And we could do that today.
Yeah, we could do it today, and we should do it today. But unfortunately, we would get stopped from doing it today, generally.
Yeah, no, that's one of the problems, isn't it? Because we've talked about this, that the privacy laws today might mean that we don't have these pictures in 30, 40 years' time.
No, exactly. And, of course, he's commissioned to do that stuff, and people will continue to be commissioned to do that stuff. But, when you look at the stuff from, like, Derby and the homeless people in, Aldgate and all of those places, realistically now, if you do that kind of stuff, you not that you necessarily get in trouble, but you feel subconsciously like you're stealing something, like you're doing something a little bit dodgy, you're doing something a little bit dangerous. And actually, if it weren't for those pictures that he's taken and other people have taken, we'd have no documented history of that stuff. I challenge anybody to walk around that Don McCullin exhibition today and not actually halfway around think, I want to leave. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to leave. Because it's hard to look at. It's bloody hard to look at. And, the photography is amazing. And it's interesting when you look at the way that the exhibition is curated and the pictures that, you start with. Of course, it's chronological mostly, but not entirely, because you go from the 90s to the African desert in 2014, 2016, and so the curator of that exhibition is leading you from the origins of his photography through the really harrowing, horrible stuff, and gently giving you the exit route, which is the nicer, softer pictures. And some of those are not necessarily in chronological order.
God, those nicer, softer pictures are not softer, though, are they? I mean, look at those pictures of him taking images in his shed of things like mushrooms. I mean, those are desperate pictures of somebody
I saw some of those
who spent so long at war.
20 years ago, when I was a student. And he was doing those Spanish still life style pictures in Somerset in his shed. And they were so dark. And he just printed all of his retrospective, and then he'd done these really dark still lives. And we talked about, what if we'd viewed this exhibition backwards? What if we'd seen all these dark landscapes and dark still life?
Yeah.
How do we explain the person who created those? And maybe the exhibition did explain the person who created those.
Sanjay Jogia.
I've seen some of Don's things, and I've seen some bits that he's done for Canon recently. He's done some things with Clive Booth while he was in India.
Oh yeah.
And his approach to the world and seeing the world, it's incredibly refreshing. It's incredibly, to a certain degree, it's innocent, considering how much he's seen that's the exact opposite. It's fascinating that he has this approach to his photography, and that very simplistic approach to people and a moment. And earlier on Kevin was saying that when you see something and it kind of feels like you're stealing something, I think that's our right as photographers, for journalistic portrait, whatever it is. If you don't steal that moment, no one will get it. It's gone.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. But the fact is, the world we live in, and the PC world we live in, and the legal world we live in, and the rights, and they're being eradicated from us. Totally. And yet, Neil and I were talking about this yesterday, and we were in his car talking about it, and he's got a dash cam that's filming everybody on the street, the CCTV everywhere. You get on a bus, there's CCTV, everything. Yet the governments and the people that be are like, no, you can't. And you walk out. If we walk out this pub now and try and go and take a picture of somebody on the street, they'd be like, why are you taking out a picture? And actually, the fact is,
well, we can right now, can't we, in this country?
We can do it.
You couldn't if you were in France.
No, correct, and that will come our way. But the fact is, regardless where you are,
you will lose these entire pockets of history will go away because we will not be allowed to do it, or not necessarily not allowed to do it, but you'll feel uncomfortable. The fact is, the people will look at you, and their first thought is that you will be taking a picture of them for negative reasons.
Exactly.
Marketing, Facebook, whatever. I don't want my picture to be on whatever.
I walked across London Bridge today with a tiny little 360 camera on a stick. Everybody looks at me.
But I think this is the contradiction. We're all being surveyed the whole time with CCTV and dash cams and whatever, security cameras constantly, and it's against our will. We're being filmed and photographed against our will.
Is it necessarily against your will though? Like my opinion is that if you're not doing anything wrong, I totally understand security, and I respect that. I respect that there are shoplifters in the world and there are bad things that happen, so I'm not worried about it. But the fact is, if you go and shoot on the street, you are immediately seen as some kind of possible predator or negative thing. And if you go back in time and you take a picture and then you fast forward 30 years, those pictures become nostalgia, and we will lose that nostalgia. It will just go. It will just disappear. And losing nostalgia is my greatest fear.
The most common issue with photography and history and memory is, it gains value after the fact.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Which is why we need to protect what we do deliberately.
And that's why we smile at moments later. We don't. I've said it a million times. You take a picture of people on the street and they're looking at their mobile phones, and you think, that's a boring picture. But in 20 years' time, that'll be an interesting picture. And we're losing that ability and that right. And it's horrible.
Sanjay's hit the nail on the head there, hasn't he? Because we said actually during this exhibition that the pictures that Don McCullin was making weren't necessarily pictures for the moment. These were images made for 20, 30, 40 years on.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is what we're used to doing. For us, it's second nature, and we're there to capture the moment for the moment, but also for the future, for future generations. And all of us have sat and looked through photographs of our parents or relatives or brothers, sisters, whether it's a family photograph from our birthdays when we were younger, or our parents' wedding albums, and we look back at these things with fondness. And we somehow we always look at it and think, those are simpler times. Let's face it. Us guys, we've all grown up in a very complex world. There's no such thing as a simple time, but it's just that perception. And as I said before, I think it's our duty to make sure that we protect the industry and protect our right to be able to capture it. And as I said, steal these moments, even if it feels like we're stealing something.
Protect history
completely,
because that's what it is. But do you think, I have this feeling about wedding photography that, recently, a couple of times this happened to me, people have said to me, I don't want you taking pictures of me at weddings. Actually, mostly about their kids, which is fair enough. I get it.
Is it a control thing? Are people actually saying, don't take my picture less than they did do 10 years ago or 5 years ago? Or is it that I know how I want to look like, I want to be in control of my image, I don't want you to take my picture?
I reckon, right, we're in the Flag and Lamb in Covent Garden, right?
And why is the Flag and Lamb?
It's my favourite pub in London.
Right, okay. It's also the last pub in England that had live fights.
Bare knuckle fighting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe London, I'm not sure.
Until tonight.
I'm fairly sure they still do it in Merthyr Tydfil, which is not technically in England, but I'm fairly sure they still do. Anyway, the thing is, right, if I stood on this, if any one of us stood on this chair now, and said, I'm going to take a great big group picture of everybody in the Flag and Lamb tonight.
What would they say?
Every single one of them would go, "Ray!" Put their hands up and go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!"
Yeah.
However, if you went up to one person at the bar and said, "I'd like to take a picture of you in the pub, please," he'd be like, "Why were you doing that?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that?" And there's no difference between the content, but it's the implication, the intonation of why you're taking that picture is the worry.
How much of that's London?
Perhaps.
Because I think if you go to a pub in Manchester, for example, and you did that,
So you think in Manchester it'd be worse, or
I think it'd be friendlier.
friendlier?
Yeah, no, I get that. I do get that.
And
in certain
don't get me
places.
wrong, I'm a Londoner. I love London. I absolutely love London.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also, I'm a realist, and I understand that attitudes are different. Londoners are made up of all sorts of cultures and people visiting for work, and people who've moved here from work.
But is it not the way? Is it not the way that it seems? Whether it's real, but is it not the way that it seems to be going?
I actually agree with you. But that's what I think. It's the dynamic that fascinates me. You know, is it a London thing? Is it just because that's the attitude and the vibe over here? Or
I think it would be the same thing in the Three Cups in Malmesbury.
Kevin,
I know all the people in the Three Cups in Malmesbury. You know,
I think you're worried. You're
I have
worried.
a beer with them for breakfast most days.
You're worried. You do. You're worried that street photography is on its last legs.
Yeah, it does worry me. And
how does that affect wedding photography?
I think it's the next, not the next thing. You know, look, we work as documentary wedding photographers.
Hey, hang on, Michael's off.
Michael's leaving.
Lou, are you buying another beer?
He's going.
for a bit.
All right.
I'll get around.
The beer sounded better. Is it your round or is it?
It's my round.
No, you
We
did buy
haven't-
the Don McCullin tickets.
No, that's fine. You're having a San Miguel and we're all pro.
Is Sanjay having San Miguel? He's kind of got an upmarket on us, hasn't he? Is San Miguel upmarket on?
it goes higher up, Mark.
It does.
I think they've got
doesn't it?
some. They've got some.
It's like £18 for 3 beers.
Well, we are in London. Sanjay loves London.
Is that normal?
Would you not feel comfortable living?
Is it?
What?
That's
That's
the flag of lamb for you.
Covent Garden.
Lamb and flag.
The fact that I could buy around and still do the tap, what's it called, contactless. That's amazing. You know, if you go to a bar, you probably couldn't even do a contactless payment with one drink.
So what do you think about the Canon EOS R? No.
This is the wrong time.
I went to the toilet. I got some drinks in.
Can I just ask one final question? It might be my last question because I can hear the public is getting more and more noisy. But so we'll need to get close to the microphone with these answers. But I wanted to ask you all about the future of photography, and with cameras getting better and better, and iPhones and Android phones becoming better and better. Do we feel challenged?
We've been taking studio portraits for 150 or 160 or 170 years. And that business will change and it will evolve and it'll be different, it'll be wonderful, it'll be amazing.
Is the end night? No. Yes and no. No. I think it's changing. It's evolving. It's becoming a different animal, and I think the nature of it's changing. Just in the same way that the nature of society and the nature of expectations of people are changing. We have to adapt. We can't expect to operate in the same way as photographers have always operated. Photography has changed, as in cameras have changed faster than I think the photographic culture has changed.
You sound like David Attenborough a bit. We're at that situation where I have this phone in front of me. It takes phenomenal pictures, and you know, we're at that point. You know, like APS-C sensors, full frame sensors. Like there's physics involved, there's science involved, and you know, you have to look at the camera manufacturers of all brands, and they must be in little rooms all around the world thinking, what the hell can we do next?
I think certainly for the foreseeable future, photography certainly should be preoccupied by dynamic range, because there was a period where everyone was just obsessed by resolution.
Yeah.
And resolution it's a red herring.
It's still happening.
It's a red herring. You know, it's for the consumer market, and mobile phone manufacturers like Huawei and Samsung and everyone else who makes mobile phones will quote megapixels because people think they understand that, and then what they don't understand is actually what's important is a dynamic range, and most people won't understand what that means.
It's important to us, but the marketing people know that's what sells.
I think it's my round next.
Michael reminded us as Sanjay got the next in that over 100 years ago, talking of progress, Kodak's George Eastman said, if we continually make improvements to our products every year, our competition will never be able to keep up. Today we went to an exhibition where the photographer we were frankly in awe of once said, it doesn't matter what camera you give me, I'll be able to make the pictures. We'll save the rest of this for a pubcast special, perhaps a new concept to the show. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Keep your questions coming in to click at fujicast.co.uk. Sanjay Jogia, Canon Ambassador, is a guest on next week's podcast because if this episode has proved one thing, photography is not necessarily about brand, it's about the photograph. And we believe in a genuine sense that as this podcast grows, it becomes as much about photography as the box from which we make the pictures that we just happen to love. My thanks to Kevin, to Michael, to Sanjay, to you, but most of all to McCullin, because without important creators like him, many of us just wouldn't be doing this today, or more importantly, learning about the world in which we live. The theme for this show is from Blue Wednesday, with additional music this week from Josh Leake, Muted, and Doug Kaufman, licensed and used with permission from Artlist. Other show notes are on www.fujicast.co.uk.
The FujiCast